All right, and welcome back to episode 31 of The Bench. I know that we didn't have Growl last week because he slept through the podcast, but do not worry, he's back this week. And how have you been doing, Growl? Saw you were able to actually 20-man HC. Seems like a very cool endeavor for you.
Yeah, so I wasn't here last week. I was really sick. I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather. You could probably hear my throat. But yeah, I've been playing a lot of hardcore. Game is really fun. Oh, I love hardcore, but sometimes I miss retail too. I miss healing. Healing is so hard though. It's so hard. I can't do the healing challenges. I need to rely on my really strong tank to help carry, but I will be back next season.
Oh, you're coming back?
Nah, he's still dead. Yeah, Pete is still dead. Pete is still sick. And we're taking
everyone.
over.
Everyone wish Growl to feel better soon. Still not feeling great, so welcome, DORKI.
Yeah, welcome, DORKI.
Yo, glad to be on. There are many things I would like to talk about.
Dude,
I can't usually on the other podcast.
Yeah, fortunately enough, we got unlimited time for whatever you want to talk about. So basically, the servers as of this show coming up are currently under maintenance. What exactly is changing? Do you even know, Squishy? So it's like, it's the new season, so there's no old season rewards, but there's no new dungeons. What's going on with Valorstones and crests? Like, do you even know?
So I think, to my understanding, this is probably going to be like the awkward in-between period where nothing happens. I believe last time this happened, you couldn't even upgrade your gear because the season gear upgraders were on season 2, season 3 of Dragonflight, but the gear was in the previous season, meaning that by the time you're watching this, it might be too late to spend your crests and upgrade your gear. So I hope you did it. Godspeed.
Okay, so but for people who are trying to come back to the game and play next patch, I would say, fortunately enough, the only thing that you actually need to do is go and get the ring from the Siren Isles. Go get the Circe Circlet, which looks like it's BIS for every single specialization until the end of time, but
not every, but a lot.
Okay, it'll probably get nerfed. I would have to guess though.
Wait, how long does it take? I don't have it farmed actually.
Hour and a half, maybe.
Total? I don't even think that long.
No,
it's quick.
It's fast.
It's quick.
There's no gating or anything either. Yeah. It's just literally the purple quests in the zone.
To my understanding, though, what else is coming out on the patch? The Operation Floodgate should be available, just not in Mythic Plus difficulty, obviously, because the season hasn't rolled over yet. The new Delves should be available, but still on the old rewards. And CE should obviously still be available for Race to World Last.
So if you're actually looking to play a new specialization next patch as well, Delves start at 639 gear. So
the rewards don't go up yet, I don't think.
Well, but they're okay. Obviously not next week, but the week after, right? Whenever the season starts, they start at 639 gear. So you can effectively get a very quickly 639 geared character and kind of jump into the season that way. Obviously M0s as well, also a great option to get some quick loot. Okay, DORKI, do you think 10s are doable like week 1? We were kind of talking about this a little bit.
I don't know how much you guys have talked about it, but I'm actually really so we've been playing these keys at max item level, right?
Yes.
On PTR.
Yeah.
And we're only doing like 14, 15s, like maybe 16s on some of the easier keys. They are also extremely hard, so I'm just like thinking a 12 is going to be like, we're not expecting to see one for a while, right?
I don't think we're expecting to see a 12 until you're 665 item level or something like that, because we were in best gear too. Like, we're not only are we 678, but we are 678 of gear that we've acquired off a vendor.
Yeah, well, I mean, keep in mind, PTR keys are not really indicative just because we're like just doing YOLO keys. People aren't really tryharding. People aren't really like figuring out.
People are on a mage that they've never played before.
Yeah.
I also think historically, halfway through the first week, Blizzard's going to come in and start taking the axe to various things. So maybe not halfway through the first week. Maybe by the end of the first week.
Yeah,
but I think the first week is going to be pretty difficult.
I don't think you're going to be able to pug 10s out of LFG the first week, but I do think that 10s are maybe going to be possible. I just don't know if it's going to be like LFG-able. So, dude, a couple of these dungeons, like Operation Floodgate, I wouldn't step foot in there in a pug. Like, that place is crazy in LFG.
Yeah, like Priory too.
Yeah,
that was kind of insane.
Oh god.
Dude, there's just so many casters. Like you have to play some of those areas super slow, and if you don't, I think that Floodgate suffers from the same thing. If you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, you can easily wipe.
But then again, we said I remember flashback. We said Dawnbreaker was the hardest dungeon by far on PTR, and it comes out and it's a trivial dungeon that they mega nerfed on live. So I don't know what they're gonna do, but it's completely possible that they tune everything down again for live.
I think Priory and Floodgate do need some tuning on the mobs that are in the dungeons. I don't even think necessarily those dungeons are bad. I do think that it needs a little bit more tuning because it's a lot harder than the other dungeons right now.
Yeah, so I've personally been really optimistic about these dungeons, and I've been saying that on my podcast. But
Yeah,
now I'm a little bit concerned. I'm honestly worried for the civilians. I feel like it might be another season that's going to be really rough, especially on the healing checks. This might be the most brutal healing season yet. Or am I crazy?
I think this
Like,
feels
I haven't
like
been playing too much PTR.
it's like Dragonflight
It
Season
feels like
1. There's like it's the heal checks are it's very similar to what they were in Dragonflight Season 1. You remember the last boss of Core of Stars, you remember the first boss of Shadow Moon Burial Grounds, how it just does all of your HP over the course of the fight. There's a bunch of ambient damage in a lot of these dungeons as well. I kind of expect that those heal checks are going to get tuned down. I actually don't expect those heal checks to stay as tight as they are right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
How is like
Yeah.
incoming tank damage?
Well, I personally haven't played too much PTR myself. I just like started jumping back into PTR myself, but it's a lot more chill than last season, that's for sure. Because
Okay.
I know season 1 War Within was like, the tank season where it was just like
Yeah.
nonstop tank buster. But tanks right now still feel weak, which is not ideal for me at least. I know some people prefer tanks being weaker. That's kind of like the goal of this expansion. Blizzard has mentioned it in their blue post. But I personally prefer when tanks were strong. I feel like tanks are it's a role that's underplayed and people would enjoy it so much more if you felt powerful playing it, and we don't.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah,
new build for Prot Warrior. Have you seen this, Squishy, this week? There's a Colossus. People are playing Colossus Warrior instead of Mountain Thane now, and it has been discovered to do like DPS levels of damage, and I've seen some DPS come in fourth place occasionally compared to some very good tank players.
That's nothing
Yeah,
new
it
for you.
pops up really hard.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Yeah, I've seen some clips. No, but it actually does insane damage. But the problem with Colossus Warrior is I don't know if you'll be able to survive with it in hierarchies. It's not a living spec. You're built for
Yeah.
damage.
Funnily enough, you said that the tanks are pretty weak right now. I feel like tanks, a lot of the tanks that I've been playing with, sure, there's still opportunities for them to die, but more often than not, I feel like they've actually had a significant increase in survivability compared to last season. Like, I don't feel like my tank is also dying randomly because they didn't parry enough of the mobs. Maybe that's because we're not playing with a ton of Prot Paladin.
Well, you also have to keep in mind you're also playing with like extremely good tanks, right? I've seen some shit out of there. So season 1, I've been playing a lot of DPS, right?
Yeah.
I've been playing like a lot of Boomkin and Frost DK, and I pugged a ton of keys. Every time I'm pugging keys, these tanks are dying nonstop. It's actually crazy.
Interesting.
I mean, I do feel like tank players on average are like not as skilled. I know some tank players might hate me for saying this, but it is what it is, right? Like tanks have always been one of the easier roles in the game, especially when it comes to raiding, where like you don't really have a whole lot of jobs. All you're doing is kind of just like taunt swapping. But I would say the tanks are usually the weak link. I mean, this season's probably gonna be healers just because of how much harder healing's gonna be.
I agree with that.
I don't think people are going to allow heal checks to actually wipe them, though. I've never seen people complain about anything more than wiping to a heal check. Like, for some reason, there's something just so visceral about whenever you wipe to a heal check, players just immediately start complaining, and to the point where Blizzard feels forced to need to actually make a change.
Yeah, because it feels bad for everyone, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not just it feels bad for the healer because the healer is like, all right, I let the entire team down. It feels bad for the DPS because they just want to play the game, but they can't. And
Yeah.
it feels bad for the tank because the tank's like, I couldn't have done anything. Like I'm just a tank. I'm just AFK here hitting the boss, and randomly my team is just falling apart. So it kind of feels bad for everyone. But I mean, I understand why they do it, right? Because we had all those seasons of, oh, they're playing 4 DPS. Oh, healers are just like they're the cosmetic role, and
Yeah.
yeah. So I think Blizzard wants to move away from that direction, but I personally feel like they've gone a little bit too far.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think it's interesting. What healer or what tanks are you actually projecting to be good next season? Because I kind of felt like all of the tanks are around the same. It's felt like maybe Paladin and Venge are a little bit tankier than other tanks, and the rest of the tanks are about the same level, like slightly below.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also they bring more, right? Because
yeah,
prop paladins, like, they can actually help a group in those heal check situations, and Demon Hunter with their CCs, of course. But yeah, I'm also on the same train. I'm also thinking it's those two mostly.
I mean, I think that's good. I feel like tank survivability parity is actually like a pretty nice thing to have. Now, I think your tanks need to be able to live pretty much everything that they're going to be looking to do, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say like my favorite seasons have been the ones in the past where it didn't really matter what tank you played. They were all pretty powerful. It's just like obviously some of them were more OP, like end of BFA or end of Shadowlands. Those were definitely the most fun times.
Yeah.
Or Legion, like a lot of Legion tanking felt great.
Legion tanking was, are you picking a good tank or a great tank? That was really weird.
BFA Twilight Dev. Oh.
I will say it seems to me like people are more optimistic for this patch. At least, funnily enough, for me, I feel like I've been more optimistic for this patch than I even was for the expansion launch. Just something about the gameplay experiences, something about the dungeons. I think that the zone and everything is just like way more interesting, and it seems like people are also more interested in the game than they were on expansion launch, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, I think people are hungry for a good retail season, and season 1 kind of didn't deliver. Because I mean, we saw it at the beginning of this expansion, right? A lot of people were like optimistic about how the expansion ended up, but the season just didn't really play out how we wanted it to play out. Because like,
sorry,
I was gonna say, like, remember when it came out, people were talking about how like great the campaign was, the storytelling was like an all-time good, just like all around positive vibes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Theme-wise, I think this is something that is a huge change of pace for WoW. It's always been really dark, really serious for the past like however many seasons as well. And I know theme goes really, really hard for a bunch of the casual player base, and I think for a good chunk of the more hardcore player base as well. The casino theme, goblins, like it's so much more loose and fun. Like it feels like a lot of the constraints in order to fit the theming of a dark, grim, serious, story kind of constrain the devs into a really narrow or some maybe not narrow is not the word, but they've done it a lot of times before. But now with goblins, they're able to go crazy. They have crazy jazz bands playing for the music, crazy cards, they're able to make jokes, like it just I think overall people are just really happy about the change of pace. And also I do think that the devs themselves have been really on top of listening to feedback this cycle. Like we've said that in the past, but a lot has happened in the past 2 seasons, from the Mythic Plus changes to the crest changes that happened recently. Like it's awesome how much they're listening to the community on all this.
I
I
don't know. What were you gonna say, DORKI?
I don't know, you go ahead.
I think it's one of those things that, like, to me, the issue with it was like it felt like Dragonflight Season 5. That's the issue with War Within Season 1 is that it literally just felt like Dragonflight Season 5.
I've said exactly the same.
Even though like stuff changed, ultimately it felt like it was just like I've kind of seen this before. And in this season, it doesn't feel like I'm playing like a unique, like a completely different game, right? It's not like a ton is changing like on an expansion level or anything like that. But it does feel like it's more fresh in a way that it's like, okay, I'm actually craving this right now.
Yeah, I think a large part of it is Blizzard had to go through a lot. They had to work with a ton of different changes to M+. Like, what do we have? We lost affixes. We have the key level squish. They changed up the whole reward structure. There's been like a ton of changes, right? Like more changes
Yeah.
than we've ever had in the entire history of M+.
We had CC affecting casts, and now CC not affecting casts. And then now they've reduced the amount of tank busters and caster mobs in pretty much every single dungeon straight across the board because they realized people hated that.
Yeah, I think it was just like it was one of those growing pains that we had to go through in Warframe Season 1. And I'm sure we're coming around, and it's going to be a lot better in the incoming season.
I think as
That's
well.
kinda how I see it.
Something that's kind of like low key that like actually makes a big difference for me and for a lot of people is like really good class balance, particularly surrounding Mythic Plus. Actually makes a pretty big difference. It makes a big difference in people's ability to be able to get into groups. It makes a difference for people's ability to actually like, you know, continue to play the game. And I think that this season actually looks quite good in terms of class balance. And I mean, we're going to talk about the Aug Evoker nerfs as well, but Aug Evoker getting canned is a huge deal for class balance because now you have more slots that are available for Mythic Plus specializations.
Yeah, I think we should just go there now. All got canned. All got deleted.
This isn't a how do I describe this? This isn't a nerf for balancing purposes. This is a nerf because they don't want you to play the specialization anymore. It's kind of like whenever they nerfed Demonology Warlock back in Warlords of Draenor, where they were like, we don't want you to play this anymore. That's what they did to Aug here. They reduced Shifting Sands versatility effectiveness by 20%. Breath of Eons now accumulates 8% of damage taken, was 10%. This is a massive nerf for Raid, like absolutely huge nerf for Raid. And then Closest Clutch Mage, which is targeted at Mythic Plus. It's basically the you gain extra Ebb and Might effectiveness while in a 5-man party. It now increased the effectiveness of Ebb and Might and Breath of Eons by 10%. Outside of a raid was previously 25%. So they've actually taken a sledgehammer at this. And I was already of the opinion that I thought Aug was like on the downswing. They weren't looking like that great. They were maybe looking playable, but not like OP. And now this spec is completely dead. I don't think you can play the spec next patch.
This is in addition to when previously they removed the ability for Aug to buff tanks and healers. Like, you are only buffing DPS in the first place, and now you're just buffing them a hell of a lot less. And I think this is what the player base wanted.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, they've been waiting for it. I mean, Aug has only gotten nerfs since it came out, right?
Yeah. I think it's time for Aug to sit on the bench for at least one tier, and I think that's totally fine.
Until the 0.5 patch.
It's
and then we're back.
I think this is maybe setting them up to rework the spec. Like, I think this is like prepping for a rework. Like, these changes are crazy.
I mean, maybe it's a hot take, but personally, I like playing with Aug. Playing with Aug is like super comfortable. It's nice having a DPS that actually does something outside of DPS. Because for the longest time, it's been a pain trying to get a DPS to do mechanics. You guys remember the whole mechanic rogue back in BFA?
Oh, Gouge bot.
You have a mechanic rogue. Like, we haven't had one of those for a while. And I think it'll be like really rough transitioning from playing 2 DPS Aug over to back to 3 DPS. And speaking of which, we need to bring back healer jobs. You guys remember when we used to call everything healer jobs? It's like, oh, you know, you gotta do like some mechanic on the boss, right? Where like you have to like carry a ball or some shit. That should be the healer job. Or oh, you gotta start RP. Like, that should be a healer job.
You know
it just sucks that you can't really have that anymore because healers are having to heal every global.
That's a good point.
I mean, yeah, we just gotta like tune down the healing a little bit. Give them back jobs.
They should lower the healing. That way healers can do all the jobs at Mythic Plus. That's a good point.
Yeah, that was when Pete used to play the game more too. Now he's a fucking classic Andy because, you know, there's too much healing involved.
It's crazy.
Not enough healer jobs.
It's crazy. We lobbed Pete and now we have somebody in the podcast goes, bring back healer jobs.
Yeah, bring back healer jobs. That was a good time.
Is this necessarily a bad thing that they've just completely gutted Aug for a season? I don't even know. Like, a lot of people like fucking hate Aug and they wanted them completely dead.
It's 100% better for the game. Like,
okay.
It just gives more DPS slots. There's nothing more important to this game than being able to play the game. It's like what Peekaboo once said. Like, retail is a great game. The problem is you just can't play the game. Like, it doesn't matter how good the dungeons are. The dungeons could be literally the best dungeons ever. If class balance isn't there, and if the classes you play aren't fun, then the season is just bricked, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of the revolving door balancing technique, where they just kind of you're good for a little bit and then you're really bad for a bit. Like I'm not fully on board with like you doing it very often, but Og, as I think DORKI said, it's been BIS ever since it came out.
Yeah.
So it's time. It's time for it to go sit on the bench for a bit.
I think everybody agrees. Like I've been somebody who's playing Og, and dude, I was just saying too. Like I hope that I can avoid playing Og this season. It was fine whenever I picked it up because I was like, yeah, this is fine. I just want to play. It's not fine whenever I'm like forced into it for the 4th season consecutively, and I didn't really want to play it to begin with.
It's also like you think about that's the Mythic Plus on raid side. No evokers. Like I really hope Og is BIS this season. That is so horrifically annoying to play in raid. I'm pretty sure the majority of people would rather just play dev and have fun than go through spreadsheet simulator and follow the weak aura on Og and raid. It's abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, raid's a completely different story too.
I'm shocked that it got shot. I'm not going to complain though, because now I think that a lot of different specializations look really good in Mythic Plus. Because here's the thing with Mythic Plus is like you start off and you have the best DPS specialization. Take Enhancement Shaman for the season, for example, and you go, you know what would go great with an Enhancement Shaman? Another Enhancement Shaman. However, I don't want to play another Enhancement Shaman, so I'm going to play an Og Evoker instead. So now we have an Enhancement Shaman and an Og Evoker, and then you're like, okay, well now I only have one slot that I can look at. And this season looked like it was going to be the same. Oh, we start out. Mage looks OP. Let's grab a Mage. You know what works well with the Mage? Another Mage. But I don't want to play a second Mage. Let's grab an Og Evoker. That's the problem with Og. Like, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of which, so about the raid, what are the vibes from you guys? Like, I know how Janos and Max feels about it, but what about you guys?
Execute looks really powerful because 2 of the 3 final bosses have a hard breakpoint execute starting at 30 and 40% in the last 3. Sorry, I worded that weird. 2 of the 3 last bosses have an execute that has a hard enraged attached to it. Like the damage you do before this threshold does not matter. And the hard enraged timer starts when you enter the last phase. So at 30% on One-Armed Bandit, you have 1 minute and 40 seconds to kill the boss or you die. And on Muggsy, it starts at 40%, and you have some amount of time that I don't know until he hits 100
It's 100 energy, yeah.
That's really unique to me. But I don't actually know what classes have execute, so...
I mean, Execute's way less good than it used to be back in Classic. People like to talk about Execute like you're doing twice as much damage, but that's just not the case anymore. That's not how specs in WoW, Modern WoW at least work. But that didn't answer the question.
They've actually trimmed a lot of those, like... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that didn't even answer the question. Like, how are you feeling about the raid?
Oh, feeling? Sorry, I thought we were talking about class balance.
Oh yeah, I was just talking about like general vibes.
Oh, general vibes. The raid looks fucking fantastic. Other than Rick Reverb, I do not like that fight, and I think that will be the ration end of the tier. But overall, I think it has the potential to be one of the best raids they've ever done.
Okay.
Theme wise, yes. Boss mechanic wise, we'll see. But even looking at Gallywix, the fight mechanics seem way simpler and way less punishing than Farak and Ansarek were. So I'm really like, I remember coming into Narrowbar Palace titles. You remember I said like I'm not looking forward to Mythic. I feel they basically kind of the opposite this time around. I'm really hyped for it.
I think the raid looks a little bit easier, just like straight across the board. I do think that Muggsy was actually pretty difficult during testing, but I think that that's a fight that gets better once you see a really good guild do it. And so then you kind of have
their strat.
Yeah, exactly. Once you have the blueprint for like what that fight is supposed to look like, I think that boss actually gets a lot easier. And I don't think that a slightly easier raid would be something that people would be super upset about. But similar to Squishy, I think the vibes of the raid are super good. I actually think the mythic mechanics on a lot of these bosses are pretty cool as well. Sprocket Monger, Styx, Junk Bunker. I think that those are fights that are very, very unique. Kind of like, people talk about Blackrock Foundry and Operator Thogar as like this pinnacle fight that looks super cool because you have the trains coming around. I think that there's a couple of fights in this raid that could go down not as like that cool of a fight, but just in terms of like what the fight is whenever you're doing it. I think that it could actually be very captivating for people.
I mean, the first boss alone, like it's a huge tank, and you have to like kamikaze bicycles into it to like start the bird phase. That's
a cool
just
boss.
cool.
That's a cool boss. Like just straight up, that was a cool fight.
I think, like, I'm not gonna say what it is. I wonder how many times people are going to die before the first boss, before you engage the boss. You know what I'm talking about. And for people who don't,
I died.
you may be one of the few who die before the boss starts.
Oh, that might be me. I am not prepared.
You'll be fine, actually.
Will he?
Well, he'll be talking to his chat.
Okay.
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 I died to it. I think
Yeah.
almost our entire raid testing group died to it.
Yeah. It's very funny.
What have you been seeing from like an outside perspective on the raid, Dorky? What are you thinking about it?
I don't know anything about the raid at all. I'm like completely blind right now.
Mhm.
For me, I just got. I mean, last tier. Well, I guess this tier, right? Like current tier, damn near burnt me out. Like, I gotta say, this was a rough tier. I mean, it was kind of enjoyable. Like I did enjoy the bosses, but holy hell, I thought about quitting Mythic raiding the same way you did, Settles. And
I thought
I don't
about
know.
quitting
I
this
hope
tier
for
after
this tier. Wait, really?
Yeah, after this tier, it was really bad for me. I told Tettles, like, if there's one more tier like this in a row, I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot handle another one of these. It was awful.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, like, Tettles, what would need to happen for you to come back to Mythic raiding? I feel like that's on the minds of a lot of players who used to raid.
I like Mythic raiding. I actually like the bosses. I think for me, I don't know if I necessarily have the same issues that a lot of other people have with raiding.
That
First
could
off,
be a personal issue.
yeah, I think that re-clear sucks. I hate farm. Anytime that I'm asked to do farm for more than 1 day a week, I just want to completely like quit the guild like immediately. There's like that dilemma. I also think that the fact that I have to do 60 Mythic Plus dungeons week 1 while simultaneously casting the Race to World first, again, is a very niche thing, but there's a huge amount of time that's put in outside of actually just doing the raid that I would love to be raiding, but instead I'm in Rookery trying to farm this stupid weapon that I don't really need, but my guild would want me to have for the first like 2 bosses of the raid before it gets replaced with something else. And that to me also kind of sucks. And it's just like, I think it's a bit of like a time commitment versus I don't really like farm that much. I love prog. I think that progression rating is some of the most fun that I actually have in WoW. And so it's actually not an issue necessarily of prog, but I think that it's a lot of work to be in a Hall of Fame level Mythic rating guild. Like it is genuinely like close to a second job level of work sometimes for some of these people.
I mean, it really is, yeah.
I think part of the issue is just like it's 20-man Mythic guild logistics. That's the way a 20-man guild happens, right? Because it's hard to keep 20 people online, and the amount of funds that you need going to the next tier to be the best, you need a lot. So you have to keep going during farm. But you look at any other game, once you clear the tier, you're like, hey guys, see you next time. Like, see you for the next raid.
Now,
I think it's also players have gone a lot more hardcore.
Yes.
At least that's how I remember it. Because like I don't know, maybe it's just me. I swear there was like a shift sometime end of BFA or maybe like sometime during Shadowlands where guilds just started upping their hours, upping their days, upping the amount of like work you have to do outside of raid, more weekors involved, all that stuff. Like is that I don't know, is that like just me or
no, that's 100%
No,
true.
absolutely.
Like Nathria, I remember we had an officer meeting in the middle of Nathria, and we're like, why is our rank sliding? And then it's, because all of these guilds that are above us say that they're rating 12 hours a week, but they're rating 24. They're rating 6
Or they
days.
just increase from 4 days to 5 days or something.
Yeah, exactly. The amount that it takes also, because there's also this expectation that you've watched 30 hours of a boss progression during Race to World first, and you're just like expected to show up with the entire boss's cast sequence from your player's perspective. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's no blind
you have to know
prog.
their CD timings.
You're supposed to, I'm supposed to have watched this 1.5 hour documentary by Dratnos on the final boss before I've even stepped foot in the raid.
Yeah, I've seen some of his videos. I can't believe his answer egg video was like literally an hour and a half.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, And I remember as well, like I did Fyrak time or not Fyrak timers, Razageth timers for my guild, like where I basically mapped out every single player's defensive, and I spent probably 10 hours like setting up this weak aura for everybody just so they knew what they were pressing when we were time spiraling, who was gripping who was pressing what defensive, and it was valuable time spent. But to spending 10 hours outside the raid doing something for a 4-hour raid night is just not sustainable.
I wonder how many guilds don't do that. Like, what rank do you guys think where guilds don't do that whole like pre-planning?
I think that your officers in pretty much every guild that's getting cutting edge are doing that.
I agree. I think
Okay.
I think that is the determined way to Mythic raid in WoW. Like that is, if you are not doing that in a Mythic raiding guild, you are doing it wrong, because that is what everybody does.
Now,
But not every guild is like that.
I might also say the wrong thing here, but I do think that one of the reasons that I quit raiding is because they haven't necessarily made it difficult for me to Mythic Plus at a level that I'm okay with without being a Mythic Raider. Now I zoned into this Mythic raid, and I kill some loot pinata bosses every single week. But they are not incentivizing me to prog raid, and they show up and they give me they're giving me a dinar. You mean that I don't have to raid and I can get some bis loot? No, say no more, please, Blizzard.
In the comments right now, Tettles is about to nerf this again.
No, but like,
God damn it, titles.
if I felt like I had to raid, it's like what you remember when JB was going through this phase where he wasn't raiding and his gear was just completely garbage.
Now JB's opposite.
But for me, if my gear was going to be garbage, I would get my ass back to the raid. Like I would raid and I would hate it and I would be very upset about doing it. But it's a little bit worse gear, but it's not that much worse. And you can end up crafting some alternatives. It's like kind of close, and it's not really the end of the world.
Did you ever get Spy Masters this year?
I did. I got carried.
Good for you.
God, Spy Masters was awful to get.
I got carried.
We did.
I got DM'd over Christmas because there was a guild, Rain, who didn't have enough people, and they go, "Do you want to kill some mythic bosses?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then I showed up, and I was like, "So we're killing 4 bosses?" They're like, "We're killing 8 bosses." I was like, "What do you mean we're killing 8 bosses?" So I was basically getting. I lived all of Ansurek. I lived the entirety of the fight, but I was getting heavily carried.
Yeah, you lived all of Lady Ashara too. You remember Ashara?
That's right.
And you remember that clip, I'm sure.
I was in bear form all that fight as well. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes you get carried on a boss, but I don't know. Raiding, they've made it really hard to be a mythic raider, and I think that so many guilds also, basically no new WoW guild is forming because it's so impossible to fight the roster boss every single tier.
Yeah.
That's why you're seeing guilds drop off each and every single week. And it doesn't necessarily happen to guilds that are around the level that we play at. Like Hall of Fame level guilds don't really die too often. But anywhere that's non-Hall of Fame, just like a generic cutting edge guild, those guilds are dying left and right. I think that's a huge issue.
One of the things I wanted to mention, your other point was like, doing too much, gearing up in the first week. Like one of the common complaints is the first week, especially without a heroic week, which there is no heroic week, is every hour that you are not in Mythic Plus during that first week, you are essentially losing out on gear and making your guild's progression slightly worse, which is a brutal thought. But I wanted to propose this because it happened recently. In Destiny, for the first, I think, 72 hours, they cap the item level of the raid and tune it around that. And then after that time, they remove the cap and let people go in at whatever item level they want. Do you think that could work in WoW?
I mean, it could, but it would be really jank. It would feel really bad to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of an interesting thought to me because, I don't know whether the Race to World First guilds actually want gear to be removed from the equation. I assume they do because it seems like the sentiment is we do too many splits.
Oh, it's gotten so much worse too. I've heard complaints literally last night from some Liquid players.
So, I wonder if that would be Blizzard would ever go for it, or even if it would make sense. What is this tier? It's 639 max. They capped it at a heroic item level of 626 for the first week of Mythic, and tuned around that.
Well, you weren't getting better than 6.
So wait, hold on. So you're saying
anyways.
cap everyone?
Yes,
capped the entire
you
game.
cannot enter Mythic Narrowbar Palace. Like, if you're high, like the PTR scaling, if you're above 626, you just get capped at 626.
Nobody was 626 the
Oh.
first week, anyways, though.
Okay, or lower, 613,
619 or
Something, I don't
something. Yeah.
something like that.
623 maybe, yeah.
But
Yeah, dude, people would get so pissed. I feel like
I think World
I
of
can't
Warcraft.
only imagine how mad people would be.
World of Warcraft does this thing where it's like, you know, once you get the gear, you just like you get more powerful. I can't imagine getting a piece of gear and not getting more powerful. I feel like people would just get
for
super...
1 week, if they only let it last
Yeah,
for
it
1
would
week?
only be for a week. Yeah, I mean, it definitely wouldn't be a huge deal, but it's just like it's all optics, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
how
fair.
people perceive it rather than how it actually is.
True.
Dude, do you guys remember this? Like, do you guys remember back in Legion? I remember hearing rumors that like Exorcist was doing 8 splits and thinking that was crazy. I was like, oh my god, Exorcist is doing 8 splits for the last tier of an expansion. That is crazy. And now I'm sitting here thinking about Echo and Liquid doing 18 splits, and I'm just like, yep, that's it. That's just what they're doing.
Oh my god.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten really extreme. I mean, actually, I have a question for you guys. So this has been like a topic I've been thinking about. So I've been playing Monster Hunter, right? And
Okay.
Monster Hunter Wilds is coming out. And this franchise has been around for a long time. There's a lot of veteran players. Players have gotten a lot better. And
Yep.
the reviews have just gotten released. People have been saying how Monster Hunter Wilds is like maybe too easy, which has a lot of the fans concerned. But they might be making the right decision, right? Like this kind of happened with the whole Dark Souls series too. I don't know how much you guys played with Dark Souls games, but like the original to Elden Ring, the game has gone significantly more complicated and more challenging. At what point do you feel like they should dial it back? Is it a problem? Because for new players, if the curve just keeps growing, if the game is just always getting harder, they're gonna satisfy the veteran players, right? Like players like us who have been playing this game forever. We're not gonna enjoy the game if we're playing something like Cataclysm difficulty, right? Or like maybe even Mist of Pandaria would be too easy for us. But there's probably a right difficulty curve for players who are new to the game, right? Like where do you guys draw the line?
I think WoW's tough. I think the floor for WoW is really low, and the ceiling is incredibly high with how complex rotations and like mostly rotations are. And I think part of the difficulty of raiding right now is doing generally simpler like not simple, but mechanics while also performing in most cases, very complex rotation these days. I think if you put a majority of players who are more casual and they don't have to perform the rotation, they would be able to survive some of the more difficult mythic bosses if they were able to put their full brain focus on them. But the complexity of the classes combined with the complexity of the mechanics makes the floor quite low for people's performance. And then compare that when you also have to cater to the race to world first, which the ceiling is incredibly high, that the raid has to immediately take a 20% shot the second the boss dies. Like you said, it's only going to get worse. And we just finished here. Like, more difficulties isn't the right option. And I think Blizzard is trying to figure out what that is right now. Because similar to how they kind of cut out, like, there was a middle group of key Mythic Plus players. You know, the 12 players who got cut out of this Season 1, essentially, because of the Guile. I think they're finding a similar thing to Raid right now, where there's a middling set of group of players who don't have the logistics or the skills to do Mythic raiding, but Heroic is too easy for them. And adding a difficulty there doesn't work. So I don't know that there is a solution or what the solution is for Blizzard, because I think they're struggling with it too.
Yeah, I think Dorky hit on it a little bit earlier too. I mean, it's just like the competitive nature of gaming just as a whole, where it's like a lot of people just have this philosophy of like, why am I trying if I'm not putting my absolute all into it and putting in just a ton of research? And it's kind of like that video that was going viral, like why it's impolite to suck at World of Warcraft. Like that's like just the honest truth. Like it people just don't have this expectation that or people have this expectation that you should respect their time, and you being bad or not knowing the mechanics or not coming in with a bunch of preparation in a dungeon or a raid is just like, that's the norm. And that's crazy because it just doesn't let you play the game as casually as you would have in the past, right? In the past, you wouldn't even necessarily even have to look at a Fat Boss guide for a video. Now there's this expectation that you've watched 100 hours of the Race to World first before you even zone into a raid, which is crazy. And I mean, DORKI, I have a question for you. You and I were talking about this like a few weeks ago. You said that the biggest thing that you thought that needed to change about the raid was the difficulty curve being more gradual. Do you still stand by that?
I do. So I do, but it's hard because like, where do you even start the curve, right? Because I don't know if you guys saw Skarzard's interview with Max and Dranos,
Yeah.
but he mentioned how the solution might not necessarily be nerfing what were the two bosses? Ovanax and Kaiveza.
Yep.
He said, what if it was just bumping up the two bosses before it? And the idea of that kind of scares me, right? Because like if that is smoothing out the curve, like that basically means we're going from one-shotting the first 4 bosses. Well, maybe not one-shotting, but like we're having like first 4 bosses being pretty easy, and then you have a massive wall into, say, second boss taking 5 to 10 pulls, third boss taking 20 to 30 pulls, and fourth boss or Rashanon taking 40 to 50 pulls. Had I had to play that tier that he envisioned, it would have been an absolutely brutal tier, right? Like I'm pretty sure I would have been heavily burnt out. So it's just hard because like there aren't enough bosses in the raid to have a smooth curve that satisfies everyone, right? Like Swishy said, we have the Race War first players to consider. We have the guilds who don't even get cutting edge, right? The guilds who just kill a couple of mythic bosses to consider. And that's kind of where that's kind of like where my question lies, right? It's like, where do we draw the line? Because if we're just creating the game for veterans, that might not be the worst solution for Blizzard, right? Like maybe Blizzard just wants retail to be for largely the players that have been playing this game forever. And if you're not really a veteran, if you're more of a casual player, well, you have casual content, right? You have delves, you've got
Classic.
low M plus keys, you've got, well, I don't, yeah, that's where it sucks because I'm sure there are a ton of players who would rather play retail, but you know they kind of feel like they're better off playing classic instead. Because I mean, classic is just a completely different game, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who would rather just have retail gameplay, but not retail complexity and difficulty.
Yeah.
I think that what you're also talking about too is like what kind of made me fall in love with World of Warcraft, right? If the game ended up, whenever I started falling in love with WoW, what would have happened if the game was as difficult as it is today, right? Would I have been willing to put in as much time that is required to actually get good at World of Warcraft, right? Would I have been willing to guild hop or make those sacrifices to jump levels of guilds or push as high as I did with Mythic Plus if the game was way harder? And it's kind of an interesting question because I think it's actually difficult for players. Like I don't really see many new players jumping into the high end. Now it does happen occasionally, but it's really difficult to find somebody who's like brand new to WoW, who's finally started playing recently, and then is like a high end Mythic Plus or high end Raider. It's just not super common with the game itself.
I mean, honestly, if you don't even need to be high end, it's just like we might not even see that many.
I don't even see them playing, right?
People getting into
Yeah.
mythic rating at all, really.
I think Blizzard's gonna reach a point where they need to go down for 20 minutes at some point. I think that's slowly dying. It's slowly getting smaller and smaller. It's healthy enough right now to keep it going. But I do think that if they do another tier like Amirjasol, another tier like Nerobar, that it for the third one in a row, it's gonna fall off a cliff. If like I'm saying that, Dorky's saying that, and a bunch of my friends are saying like this is the last. I think Thayun's saying that. We talked about that last time. Like all of us have Mythic rated for a long time. If we're sick of it, there's a lot of other people that are sick of it too, and a lot less people are going to come into it. So this one better not be like Nerobar.
Yeah, I personally been mythic rating since end of Legion. I mean, I rated at the beginning of Legion, then I took like a small break from the game, and then ever since like Antorus, I've been mythic rating every tier. But yeah, it's it's gotten hard to continue doing this.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this as a streamer.
I also think there's just this mentality that if you don't get CE, like you're not allowed to not finish a tier. But I also think that is because Blizzard makes it like in other games you can go back to previous raids and it'll be just as hard as it was before. That is not a thing in WoW. You either clear it at its, tiered difficult, like in the current tier difficulty, or to become severely trivial with the next tier. Like, basically, you are on a hard deadline to finish this and get your accomplishment, or else you're not going to do it ever. And I think that's also kind of a weird thought when you kind of think of it that way.
Dude, you know what I'm thinking about? The stuff that happened to Growl, I've actually never heard of somebody doing that. Where he was like, yep, this is just taking too long. I don't care about killing Queen Ansarek. I'm done. I'm just like, I've actually never heard somebody just bow out. Now that you say it, that's actually crazy.
Because it's kind of like an obligation, right? Like if you normally do that, that's like heavily shunned upon. But because Growl's like, kind of clouded and he's like good buddies with Drogo and them, like he feels like, he's able to just like really step down without really letting his guild down. I don't know. That's kind of like the vibe I got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I also like feel that way where it's like, because you'll often hear pushback where it's like, all right, if it's too much for you, then just go raid in a more casual guild, right? Like just do that forehead. Which yeah, like you can, but I don't want to sacrifice progression duration, or if that makes any sense. Like I don't want to be having to prog an entire raid for the whole patch. I just can't imagine that. Like having to go for cutting edge this late into the season sounds awful.
Yeah, it's weird too because if let's say you come in season 3 of this expansion, you are just never going to get to experience Nerebar Palace. It's just not happening. Like you can go in, but it'll be a complete cakewalk. And similar things with all the previous raid tiers. And wow, there are so many amazing raid tiers that people just don't get to experience. And I think that's just kind of like a weird thing too.
Wow, I mean, I don't know. Nobody would actually want to go back and do Nerebar. Or like, say you made Nathria, like a playable raid right now on like a non-trivial difficulty. People aren't going to go back and do Nathria, right?
I think there are some people.
Well, what if you haven't done the tier?
Well, you're gonna have to get a guild full of people to do it, right? Like, it's not necessarily just like this individual, but it's the being able to find people that are capable and willing to go do it is tough. I mean, like, look at.
I'm not talking about Mythic, to be clear. Okay. I'm talking about heroic in this case.
I mean, look at BRD. People didn't do BRD.
Sure, I mean some did, but I think. It's a multitude of factors, and one of them is definitely the heroic guilds runs out of things to do very quickly. I think there's a lot of guilds that would go back and do like Antorus fun raid, but I see what you mean though.
Yeah, I mean,
it's actually a good point too. You kind of just like run out of things to do in retail nowadays. Like if you're not just doing M+, there's not a whole lot to do.
I think it'd be cool to like go back in a 10-man, go do an old heroic raid, and like maybe there's a newer friend of the game who didn't get to experience like some of those old raids to go back and just get to blast like heroic and Taurus. There's some really good fights in there that I think would be fun.
Yeah,
but
it would be really hard though. You would have to like actually have a team that can scale that content properly, and it would need rewards behind it for players to be like incentivized to do it.
I mean, do people enjoy?
Players are not going to do this if there's no rewards.
I mean, what do you think about Fated? Like they bring
too recent.
Okay. I guess that's fair.
No, like okay, all right. Weekly rotator time walking raid, just one raid. You go back, you get like a hero piece of loot.
I don't think that's enough. I mean, it has to be like real content. Like the problem with me whenever I'm like looking at time walking content, it has to be like something that actually engages you, something that actually gives you good rewards. Like it would have to be the mythic equivalents of Nerebar. Otherwise it'd be kind of like wasted content, right? I don't know, that's how I see it. Every time they have like some cool time walking event, I'm like, oh, this would actually be cool if it was a real raid or a real M+ dungeon, but it just all feels like a meme.
I would agree with that though, but it's just kind of like thoughts. Because after, like, in 1 week, Narrow Bar will be archived, never to be touched again, except maybe for mounts for the rest of the expansion, and that's it. But never, like, at the difficulty it once was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's not necessarily solved. I mean, I saw you guys did a Podyssey episode of like, is WoW becoming too seasonal? I mean, that's just like kind of part of the broader discussion about WoW being a seasonal game, as opposed to like an eternal game. I guess if that makes sense.
It's basically the difference between, I want to say, Legion and nowadays. Because when I think back to Legion, I'm just like pretty much always on World of Warcraft, and there's just always something to do. There's like people always on, and it feels like it feels like a live game, right?
Mhm.
Like I log on, my friends are on, we're all gaming, we're all looking for stuff to do. There's always something new coming up.
Yeah.
Legion
It could
sucked,
also just
but
be how we play games nowadays.
yeah, Legion sucked, but simultaneously was such a good game. It's like really hard to even compare.
Dude, you were,
Yeah.
I mean, at least for me, I was cheering on my friends when they got like their best legendary. I was so happy for them. Like,
Oh my god!
it
Until
was
you,
like, dude, you actually got it. Like, hell yeah.
no man, until you get a bad legendary, you can't play an alt spec. You have to play one spec of your class, and then your dumbass raid leader goes, "Yeah, you got to get 54 level on your weapon before Nighthole comes out." And so you spend the entirety of your Christmas break mathing out that you need to do 8 Mauve Souls a day, and nobody in your guild is actually like you're in a new guild and you don't have any friends to do this, so you have to do 8 Mauve Souls a day in fucking LFG. And you're like, I want to quit. I'm done with this. This is over.
Speaking of keys.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Oh,
I know how everyone always talks about how shitty the systems were in Legion, but honestly, maybe it's just because I was more casual. That's probably a large part of it. But like, none of that shit mattered to me. I definitely didn't play the game at the same level or the same way you did, Titles. So it wasn't really a factor for me. Like I wasn't mythic rating at that level. I didn't care about the whole you didn't get the right legendary or
Yeah.
or like getting your artifact level up. So that could just be a factor too. Like it could just be how serious we play the game nowadays versus how casual.
I've said it before, and it's like, I don't think Legion. I think people would be very mad if Legion got re-released and the problems that Legion had happened today. People would be very mad. But there will be nothing that can capture the way that Legion, like the game itself, made me feel about the game, right? I've never been so addicted to that stupid ass game that I was back in Legion.
Yeah.
It was just so
Yeah.
addicting. It was unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a good expansion.
Did you guys see that they're resetting keys? They confirmed it, basically.
I thought that was a good change. I mean, we talked about this a couple
What do you
weeks
mean?
ago, like completely resetting them
All
down
keys
to
are back
twos.
down to +2.
Wait, what?
So
I don't get it.
Read.
with Season 2 launch next week, your keystone will be a +2 no matter what.
Don't we do that every season? Or...
Recently, yes. But people were still questioning whether or not it was -10 or like -5 or whatever. It's just, no matter what key level you do, you're having a 2. So
Oh,
no
okay.
need to do a key this coming week. Although, you know the leveling strategy of like leveling your key the first week so you don't get stuck with a +2 in a guild group?
Yeah,
Oh,
don't loot your box.
Don't loot the key.
Yeah. So apparently that's changed, and Blizzard saw that coming. So apparently now when you complete a key on beta or PTR, this isn't confirmed. I have a couple people looking out for me, trying to figure it out. But apparently the keys are no longer in the chest. The second you complete your first Mythic dungeon or Mythic Plus dungeon, it's personal push loot straight into your inventory.
Really?
So you can no longer reroll keys by looking at what it is and not taking it, and you can't power level your key the first week because it'll just automatically go in your bag. So Blizzard saw this coming, I guess, and put an end to the fun.
Dude, I don't
I mean,
even.
it was a good change.
I don't
Like,
even
it was kinda
care.
dumb.
Like, I don't even care about it like this. The fishing for the key at the beginning of the week sucks, but at the same time, I don't want a Grim Batol 19.
I mean, that
the
speaks
funny-
more about the system itself or like the dungeons.
The best part is there's still a way around it to level it faster. You just use 1 main and 4 alts. Because as long as you don't complete a mythic dungeon until your main is done, you will get -1 of the keystone level you get then, right?
You should never do that because you care about the loot more early on than you care about the key on your main.
It depends. You don't want to get stuck
Yeah.
with a 2.
Well, to be
But
fair, also 10's gonna be like freaking impossible first
Yeah.
week.
that's also true, to be fair. Like, I'm okay with like a 6. People will do 6s, but people will not do a 2, especially in a guild group. So do like 2 keys on your alt, then swap over.
Okay, we had a lot of interviews this week as well, including this one with Charizard by Maximum and Dratnos. Squishy, what were the main points? Obviously, Dorky already hit on the one talking about basically the ramp in the raid difficulty. What other big points do you think there were
So
here?
I think this interview is worth watching in its entirely. Skarzard is a very passionate guy, and I think it absolutely comes through if you were to watch the full video because he is very verbose and explains his thought process very well. So, first of all, highly recommend listening to the full thing. I think the main thing is the main couple things are Dinars are still there. They are not announcing anything right now, but it was originally supposed to be around the 0.7 patch, which people heavily criticized. They are very scared of putting a dinar in a real season early in the patch, and it's easier for them to put it later and then push it forwards than the other way around. Then they said they're gonna announce it soon. I don't know where do you guys think this dinar went? Out of curiosity, I know it's kind of a little off topic.
What do you mean?
Like, what is the acquisition for this dinar?
Oh, I just assumed that like, the 0.7 patch was going to hit, and you're going to be able to get it via a quest line or something like that. That's kind of what I assumed was going to happen with this. It read to me when in the blue post, like maybe I read way too much in the blue post, but it read to me like they didn't want to be committed to leaving it on the renown track permanently. Like in case they wanted to axe or they hated the idea of just having dinars out there in the world, where they felt like they couldn't remove it from the renown track as a reward, and so I felt like it was just going to be a quest line that was attached to the 0.7 patch or something like that. That's kind of how I read into it, but maybe I read into it a little bit too much.
What do you think, Turkey?
Yeah, no idea. Honestly, I haven't really thought too much about it.
I'm wondering if it's gonna be a like fill a bar type mechanic, like complete 100 points worth of objectives, and the harder the objectives you do, the more points you get type thing.
Well,
Because
when do you guys think we should be getting Dinars? Or like, how do you guys think we should be getting it?
I'm personally okay 1.5, 1.7. I
1.7 feels late for me personally.
It's possible. I mean, it depends how long you want to go on bad luck protection. I don't think the first one should be 0.7. That's really long. I think having some form of bad luck protection is absolutely needed in this game. If you don't get Spy Masters for 10 weeks, like, you should have the ability to get a Spy Masters when it's your best trinket. So one semi-early, maybe even earlier than 0.5, like, I don't know.
The problem is for a
10 weeks
lot
in.
of people, there's like 2 months into the patch is like a long time into the patch for them, right? Like there's a lot of people that I know who play for like 8 weeks and they're like, "Yep, I've seen everything that I want to see for the season," and they probably would be willing to stick around as well to like kind of see that dinar out if it was like close around the horizon, right? Because they play for that dopamine of that gear reward, and they're not like fully maxed on their gear, but they want to see the cool trinket. What is that cool trinket that everybody's wearing? What does that do for me? Does that make me feel more powerful? And they would maybe be willing to see that out. Because like what is late into the patch feels very different for different people, and I think that the 0.7 is we are a month away, maybe a month and a half away from the next patch whenever the 0.7 hits, right? So I don't know. I think the 0.7
Yeah,
is
it's like
a little bit
realistically,
late.
how many players are even playing this late into a season?
Yeah.
So that's probably like data that Blizzard has, and I see. I definitely see it more as like a help players who have been kind of done with the season finish out their gear, rather than bad luck protection.
I think that's fair. I think one of the things that comes to mind from like a game dev thought is why would they remove it from the renown track unless they wanted the release to be dynamic? Now, it of course could be dynamic in they don't exactly know when they want to release it, but it could be dynamic in the fact that, like I said, like it depends on how much you do. Like, I don't think Blizzard wants to give you dinar for free,
Yeah.
but and so like if should someone getting a dinar or should someone who is killing all 8 bosses every week be getting it at the same time as somebody doing one boss a week. And the game dev part of me says no, because if this is designed to be bad luck protection, for the second player, that's not exactly bad luck protection, that's just giving them loot.
I guess how I viewed it is like this renown track feels like it's permanent, and it feels to me like they're kind of tiptoeing as to what their thoughts on Dinars are and the permanence of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible. We're just speculating until this post comes out, so...
Yeah. There was
It's
also
kind of crazy, though, because for the longest time, they've said no to Dinars in like previous interviews, and now we've gotten to the point where they're actually okay with bringing back Dinars in an actual season.
Yeah.
So that's like a pretty big step already alone.
They're listening.
We need Mythic Plus Dinars. That's our next objective.
That's why they removed them. They're adding Mythic Plus to it.
You mean like Mythic Plus items to it, or
I don't
Mythic
know.
Plus is able to get them?
Both.
I mean, I said this, I think,
Both would
whenever
be
we
sick.
first talked about... Yeah, whenever we first talked about it, I said, like, maybe they're removing it from the Raid Renown track because they don't want it to only be Raid related. It could be, like, entirely everything related. But no idea.
All right. There was this Raider IO interview, and probably the most pressing thing that was discussed were exploits in season 1. Everybody, like, dude, I don't want to say everybody, but so many people are just anti-exploit at this point too. They're just so over how many exploits there were. And you wrote this big post talking about how many exploits there were in season 1, whether it be Follower Dungeon Story Mode, Cersei Circlet, Winter Veil, Lunar Festival, Torghast. There was Mind Controlling Wild Dream Runners. There was the Dream Surge Pack Hunters. There was the Brewmaster Mind Control. There was like... Okay, so what did Morgan actually say about exploits here in this Raider IO interview, Squishy?
It's right below there.
Okay.
Raider IO basically said, do you have any plans to change how non-group eligible buffs are handled in Mythic Plus? Because stuff like Follower Dungeon buffs are being brought in. Morgan says yes. I mean, very simply, that's a bug that we're looking to resolve with Season 2. So that is being looked into right now, I believe, and will be fixed before Season 2 goes up.
Dude, I wish he would go suit off right here, suit off, mask off, and say, we're banning all these idiots who have been exploiting these dungeons. Or not banning, but necessarily disqualifying them from season rewards. I feel like nobody would shed a singular tear for people who are exploiting the entirety of the season being DQ'd from seasonal rewards. This is ridiculous.
Dude, I feel like exploiting is just... I mean, I've said this before in my podcast, but this feels like it's such a main part of World of Warcraft nowadays. The whole... Because, I mean, like, we see it everywhere, right? Like, we saw it in Plunderstorm, the whole, like, Gingy shit. We saw it in Race the World First plenty of times. We see it in MDI. It feels like it's just kind of accepted in World of Warcraft that you're doing tech, you know, like rather than an exploit.
Yeah.
I think it's like you're speeding down the highway and you get caught by one of those cameras, and instead of a cop pulling you over, like the camera knows that you're speeding and you should be sent a ticket after the fact. Like, just because you've exploited doesn't mean that Blizzard shouldn't be allowed to ban you later. Like, there's no immunity just because they don't ban you immediately. I think if they catch you exploiting after the fact, they should be able to, you know, either not necessarily ban. I'm just using ban here because that's like a pretty clear punishment. But you could be DQ'd from seasonal rewards and like other stuff too. Like, there's ways of punishing people that isn't just purely banning. Also, it is ridiculous how blatant people are with exploits in this game right now. It is absurd.
It's funny because there's precedent for them banning for taking bad buffs into raid. Zenkiki was the thing. Zenkiki was a buff that you took from Zul'Gurub, I think, into the... It was a quest in ZG or something like that, into dungeons, and Blizzard banned them and took away their title. Like, they could not qualify for title.
Good.
And then all
There
this
was another
happened.
season where that happened too, right?
Was there? I remember Zenkiki, but that's the only one I remember.
I think that was the
Like
only
End
one.
of Shadowlands or something. I don't remember.
That was that one. Yeah,
I
yeah.
swear I remember two. Oh, that was them.
It was the same one.
Wasn't there another one then? There was one in like Dragonflight too, right?
There was a buff exploit.
No. The Shadow...
Some type of exploit.
The Shadowlands one was the Mind Link thing that didn't even...
Oh, the critter!
They didn't even wipe the runs for that. I'm just bewildered still. That was crazy.
Yeah, anyway.
People would like one shot like Alg Academy in 10 minutes in Neltharis and stuff, and those runs never got wiped. I can't believe that you just unlocked a memory for me. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like they gotta be way more aggressive about fixing this. First off, I blame Blizzard for not fixing this stuff fast enough at all. I also blame Blizzard for not banning these people. I understand why you're doing this. This is dumb. Like, you shouldn't do it, but I understand why you are, because you're not going to get punished. I think the fact that you're not getting punished means that you should do it in the future. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can see the comment now. Stay mad, Tettles.
I'm mad. Like, it is annoying. I don't know. Dorky, you also play, like, Mythic Quest at, like, a high level. I feel like, for me, it's, like, anything that's brought outside of the dungeon into the dungeon, or completely trivializes the dungeon one way or the other, those are the things that I have a problem with. Things that are like inside the dungeon, particularly interactions with mobs and stuff like that, that's all tech, and that's kind of how I view the distinction between those.
Yeah, I still feel like it's hard to draw a line. Like, it's hard to draw a line, one thing, and the second thing is, my opinion is kind of biased because I just don't really care as much about the integrity of high keys.
Yeah,
Because, like, to me, it's just because, like, I've already kind of done it all, right? But, like, I remember when I used to care a lot about pushing high live keys and all that, but that's kind of, like, died down for me, and I'm not as invested in it. It's kind of same with, like, the whole raid rankings, right? Like, I know a huge part of Mythic rating is caring about raid ranks, but
parsing or
for me, like, I didn't care. Yeah, like, I don't really care about it. And remember when my guild got all that shit for doing the, what was it even called?
Silken Court bug.
Yeah, like, we didn't even bug it, by the way. Like, we didn't intentionally bug it. It was straight up just like, it just fucking happened. But yeah, people were like so butthurt about it, and it's like, man, I don't even really care, but I can definitely see why it's a big deal, because, you know, for a lot of people that this is like very competitive part of the game, and it definitely sucks when something cheesy happens.
People got so mad that you also went on stream and you go, yeah, and I'd do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to fucking kill the boss already. Like, fuck Silken Court,
people
man.
got so mad that you said, yeah, and I would kill it again like that. That is ridiculous.
Also, we saw the whole fight multiple times, so, you know, we, in my mind, we basically killed the boss already.
Yeah.
So I'll gladly accept it.
Dude, there was a bunch of other interviews as well. There was this one, and there was a question that was asked about Valorstones. I don't know, man. Like, Valorstones, I'm pretty sure everybody's in agreement that this is just like a really annoying system. Like, I'm glad that they increased the amount of crests that you're getting from Mythic Plus, but Valorstones, anytime you're gated from by upgrading your gear from Valorstones, it just feels like the system has failed me.
I think, for me, I never had issues with Valorstones, which also means that I would have no issue if they were removed. My inventory is littered with Valorstone tokens. Like, I didn't use any in Season 1. And anytime I alt need Valorstones, I just go to the Renown vendor and just pop them. But that's also because I did Renown at the start of the season. So, like, I've had no issues, and therefore also would not care if they went away.
So Valorstones become a limiting resource whenever you're getting gear really quickly on your character, or you're not upgrading over time, right? Like, if you're trying to upgrade your gear all at once, like you say you're waiting for your vault for an upgrade before you pick out what items you're actually upgrading, those are the points of which you actually get bottlenecked by Valorstones really easily. Whenever you're trying to upgrade a bunch of gear at the same time.
I understand what I think the design of Valorstones is supposed to do. It is supposed to be protection against upgrading your gear too quickly, right? Like, if you get funneled everything, you should have to do a little bit more content in order to get your upgrades.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. It's just way past that into, like, well, I mean, the real issue is, how do you actually farm Valorstones? Like, if it was like, go do content, like, let's say I'm short 500 Valorstones. If there was a way to spend 10 minutes to get 500 Valorstones, I would do it. And that's fine. But I don't know how to get 500 Valorstones. And that, I think, is the bigger issue right now. It's like, Valorstones, sure, why do they exist? There's that whole thing. But the issue is, when you need it, you cannot get it. Because Valorstones are gained passively over time, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, that, I think, is inherently the problem. Like, if it was like, you get 1,000 Valorstones when you complete the theater event outside Dorkri. I think that would be fine. It would get people doing the theater event when they need Valorstones. And, if you're short Valorstones, you're like, okay, I'll just wait till the next hour and go to the theater. And I don't think people would complain at all.
You're cooking a little bit with that one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so did they say, or did they specify in this interview why they have Valorstones?
Not exactly.
Not really.
I
But
mean,
their focus has been crests. Valorstones are in a weird space where they matter a lot in the early season, and then you have too many late season when the crests are limited. It's also not in the healthiest space, and they can do some things in season 2, and they think that they can do things in season 2 involves them making raids drop quite a bit more Valorstones. But the problem is exactly what Squishy said. The moment of which you're out of Valorstones, it feels like you're just like, well, like, how am I even supposed to farm this? Okay, I have to go. You're like, I guess I go do more Mythic Plus dungeons to get more Valorstones, but like,
I'm pretty sure the best way is Radiant Echoes, and that is insanely boring content.
yeah, like,
I mean, that speaks more about the content. But
yeah. But I honestly and truly think that is the problem, right? Like, you are short an upgrade, like 3 upgrades, you have enough crests, you did Mythic Plus, and you're sitting there like, how the fuck do I get enough Valorstones to upgrade this? And there's no clear-cut method. So, like, chests give like 2 Valorstones, that's useless. Like, I think, how much did Mythic Plus actually give now? Is it 85 per 10?
you get some whenever somebody gets IO from the dungeon as well. You get bonus Valorstones.
But how much after the buffs? I haven't done a key since they did those buffs.
I'll say 100 something. It's 100 something.
Okay. I mean, that's not terrible now. But again, like, don't make people do content they don't want to do for longer than like 30 minutes.
Like, getting Valorstones is arguably just as hard as getting crests sometimes. And crests are supposed to be the limiting factor.
Like, okay, imagine this, right? Undermine's coming out. There's the car. There's this new world event called Shipping and Handling, which is literally just you drive around and complete deliveries in Undermine. If that actually gave a decent amount of Valorstones, people would do it when they're out of Valorstones. And everything would be fine. Right?
I think that what you're saying is 100% how the way Valorstone should be approached. Like, I think that the way that they currently do it, where it's just like this accessory to the crest system, feels really, really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that Valorstones were not for the player. Like, removing Valorstones would only be better for the player, but it seems like it's something Blizzard wants to keep in order to keep players engaged.
I just don't see what the difference between Valorstones and crests for the developers themselves, like, like game dev people. Like, I just don't see what the difference is between Valorstones and crests, other than Valorstones will randomly limit me sometimes.
I think that's inherently what they're looking for, because you can get crest quite quickly.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, you can get crest quite quickly. It's just sometimes you want the Valorstones. You want the Valorstones. Like, you don't, as a developer, you don't want, to gear up too quickly. If you get a bunch of crests from like spamming something, you want to slow them down just a little bit.
Yes.
But right now, that's a lot bit is the issue.
Yeah, I mean, dude, Valorstone, it takes like 1,500 Valorstones to upgrade your weapon from the bottom of Myth to the top. Like, that's the only item you're upgrading for a while after you do that.
Go farm more wax.
No, they nerfed that.
They did nerf that.
They nerfed that straight into the ground. All right, that was all the interview stuff. You guys see this tweet by JB? This was crazy to me.
Yeah.
Says, well, team, I found out tonight that I failed my 9-month trial in my new guild. Probably not enough time to find a new guild before this tier, so we might just take a break from WoW for a bit, maybe a long bit. I've also heard that
feels bad, man.
Potentially rumors that he's coming back to NA. He also said, for what it's worth, the 9-month trial made sense given the circumstances, and I didn't have an issue with it. Just would have liked a chance to find a new guild with a bit more than 1 week before next season, and I assume that they agreed that they fucked up that part pretty badly.
That's rough.
I mean, okay, I have some thoughts on just trial culture and guilds in general. Squishy, give me your, like, what's your gut reaction to this?
I mean, that's really fucked up for the guild to let him go like 1 week before the tier. That, like, if you were going to remove him, you should have kicked him probably at least a month ago. I think trials. I mean, most of the time, I think guilds usually trial for a set duration. Anywhere from 4 to 8 to 12 weeks, or until a rating tier or prog tier is done.
That's how this guild apparently runs. Is like they trial you until they see. For context, he raids in like a world top 30 guild, so he actually raids in a pretty high level guild, and they trial you until they see you on progression.
I mean, then to me, this is solely on the guild. For whatever reason, if that was the agreement, then this is an issue basically.
Yeah.
And that's on the guild because they kind of broke the agreement there.
Well, what do you think, Dorky?
Yeah, I've already talked about this, but I mean, it seems like they already acknowledge that it's like a mutual fuck up, right? I mean, it makes sense why they have such a long trial and like how that all occurred. But yeah, like him not getting that heads up, like, look, you're probably not making it. You're probably gonna be on the bench, or you're probably gonna get kicked from the guild. You should probably look for a different guild. That should have definitely been. He should have been let known about this well ahead of the time he got kicked.
Yeah.
I think trial culture in WoW guilds is ridiculous. I think that trials, and this is just my opinion here, I think that trials in WoW guilds should basically just be, are you not like going to completely run it down? To get your foot into the door of a WoW guild, you have to have good logs or you have to have connections. Typically, it's like a combination of both to actually be able to get your foot into the door into that WoW guild. After you're able to do that, basically, in my opinion, this trial period should make sure that you are not just like the worst player that they've ever seen, and for some reason your logs are way better than your actual performance is going to be, and then you just pass that guy, right? And then, in my opinion, if somebody is actually on progression, raider or trial, and they perform poorly, they're getting kicked no matter what, especially at this level, like he's raiding at, right? There's basically no differentiation between a trial and a raider in my mind, because if you play bad enough, no matter what your seniority is in this guild, you're getting kicked. Like there's nothing here to necessarily save JB whether or not he passed or failed his trial. So I just don't understand why they didn't, after Faded even, they realized he wasn't like the worst player they'd ever seen. You just either kick him there or you pass his trial. And that to me is the weirdest thing, is like, how did this last 9 months? Additionally, Nerebar finished in like October or November for most guilds.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's changed between JB as a player between now and like November. There's no way that we learned something new since then.
Well, maybe something could have happened. Maybe he just lost passion. He wants to play Marvel Rivals instead.
But why was he still a trial, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, trials should just not exist in retail WoW. Like, it makes no sense. It made sense back in the days, right? Because like back in the days, it was okay. There's like loot distribution,
Yeah.
and like whatever else happened in guilds back then, right? Like there were benefits outside of just being in raid and doing progression. But nowadays, like raid guilds are solely there for the progression, nothing else really, right? So
Yeah.
I just don't see any purpose trials serve, because you should just be treated exactly like another member. If one of your members is performing poorly, they should also probably be on the bench or potentially get kicked.
This makes me
It should be
wonder.
no difference.
This makes me wonder if he was their fifth healer and they saw a better opportunity for somebody else who was a fifth healer who was playing a specialization that wasn't Resto Druid, and they kicked him because there was a better opportunity that approached.
Well, apparently he was on the bench for most of Nerebar, so it seemed like they probably thought about removing him ahead of time. Because that is something guilds do. I know that's what sort of happened to Pete when he was in my current guild, Humble. Like they kind of just like put him on the bench, right? Because like they didn't like explicitly kick him or anything, but he was kind of just like put on the bench, and he wasn't gonna see any progression time, so he was like soft kicked.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm assuming JB similar. Yeah.
But I think for me, for these types of guilds, I agree with Tuttles, there's no reason to have a trial. Like, I think a trial is just anything but a name. Like, it's just a name, really. I think most guilds around this level, they give them gear, they put them in for prog if they're good. Like, they're basically just a raider with a trial tag.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that trials still exist outside of the I don't know exactly where the cutoff is, but like outside of CE-ish, or late, lower end Mythic guilds, because there are a lot of applicants there, especially when your roster is fumbling. you need to fill the roster. And there are people that they will just take bodies and they'll put them as trial. They still will not feel, give them loot, stuff like that, because they're not a core member, especially if they're feeding. I think that is a completely different game for those guilds. And I do think, unfortunately, trials are needed in that way just because they don't have the, what's the word? Applicants
I
in
mean,
order to fill their roster properly.
obviously, I hate that idea. Like at that point, if say I'm an officer here, like whenever I was an officer in Might, if we were doing something like that, if I was using somebody for loot, we would have kicked them and moved on. Like I wouldn't have like felt okay, even though we needed them to fill the roster or whatever. I wouldn't have felt okay being like, yep, this is my loot body. This is the person that we're bringing to splits this week because we need people to fill out our roster. I would feel terrible.
I'm not even
that.
talking about that. I'm talking about guilds who are struggling to get 20 every week. Like even lower than what you're saying. No splits, one roster, just they don't have 20 sometimes.
Yeah.
And those guilds, there are people who apply, who want to Mythic raid, they get brought in, maybe they're not ready for it. They don't do well as a trial and then you fail the trial. Maybe they come in, they do really well, then they just get promoted. Like I think there is a very good reason for that to happen in lower guilds.
What I will say though is something that you need to know about Mythic raiding is that you're always on trial. Like, and I think that most guilds would probably have handled this maybe a little bit differently. But even if he was a raider, like he's probably still getting removed. Like no matter the trial tag is almost irrelevant here. He would have almost been removed regardless of whether he had it or not. I think that again, it's just trial culture is really weird. He shouldn't have been kicked. The week before the patch came out. That is ridiculous. Like that sucks. Like.
Raiding culture in general is weird, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I've heard a bunch of stories about like what happens in raiding guilds. Also, I mean, I wouldn't say that's true for all guilds, settles, because I do feel like it depends on the type of guild you're in, right? The lower of a rank you raid at, the more of a social raiding experience you're going for, and the higher of a guild, obviously, you're more of a progression-based guild. That's how I've always seen.
Yeah, I
Usually
mean,
when you're like a social rating guild, you generally care more about your social status within the guild rather than how good you are or like whatever it may be. Like if you just happen to be one of the officers, then you're not really gonna get kicked. Or if you happen to be like the girlfriend of someone important in the guild, then you might not get kicked. It happens.
the problem that I have with that too is like the way that I handled things in Might is like after basically there was a point where I was like, yep, this person's just not cut out for it, and it was no hard feelings, but we just let them know immediately, right? We weren't going to cut them like a few weeks before the tier. We were cutting them like a month after the tier was over. Basically, we already kind of knew, and the same thing happened in Vesper, right? Where we would do a few weeks of farm, maybe something would change, maybe something would improve. But pretty quickly after the tier is over, we've already made this decision that you're just like not cut out for the guild, and we'll just like fine. There's no disrespect. We're just gonna part ways and find somebody new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As DORKI said, Mythic raiding culture is weird.
It is
the way it's developed. Oh.
Yep.
You had to have 40 people on roster at one point. Then it was 25, and now it's 20, and that's still a lot.
A lot of guilds don't just maintain people on the bench, right? Like they're basically that's like a Hall of Fame almost exclusive thing where you have people that are on your bench. Most guilds don't actually have that luxury. Most guilds only have like 20 people total.
Most games don't do that because they have less people too. It's a lot easier to say, hey, 8 people, let's game tonight, rather than 20 people. So
completely different experience.
You know what JB is doing right now though? He's playing Fellowship.
That's an insane plug. Okay.
Did we talk about it? Oh, we haven't talked about it yet. Right?
No, we haven't talked about it yet. So Squishy, Growl, and I had the opportunity to play test Fellowship with the community manager and one of the lead devs. One of the questions that one of the most popular questions that I got for like the last week is like, how was the game, Squishy? Like, what did you think about it?
Dude, I thought it was a ton of fun. It felt like Mythic Plus without the MMO, which for some people that's what they want.
Yeah.
For some people, that's probably not what they want. But like combat, it felt like it felt like Mythic Plus. Their base UI was really good. It's customizable. Their raid frames, like The health bars are default at the bottom, like a lot of WoW people do. It's clear that the devs have played or have watched WoW, because there's even a built-in DBM timer for all the bosses and details.
Damage is the most important thing. You know that.
Yeah, I mean, they understand what the players want.
I mean,
I haven't played it myself, but I am hopeful for this game. Like, I do hope this game ends up doing well. Like, I love M+. This is why I play World of Warcraft. If it wasn't for M+, I would not be playing WoW nowadays. But at the same time, like, I don't know how the game will end up doing. Have you guys played Battle Royale before?
A long time ago.
Yes.
Or
Oh my
heard of it?
God. Yes, I did play Battle
God,
Royale.
that game was so good. I have like 150 hours in that game. Yeah, so that game, for those of you guys who are listening that don't know, it's essentially World of Warcraft arenas, except you're playing in League of Legends POV.
Mhm.
It's like a top-down kind of, yeah, and it's like that type of gameplay. So it was like extremely fun. It was a really good game, but that game just like ultimately did not succeed because like it's too much of a niche, and I kind of see this game being very similar. Like, it's probably gonna be an extremely fun game, and I'd probably really enjoy playing it on the side. But I just like don't know how much longevity there is in a game like this, and also just like how much development is needed to maintain players. Because one thing World of Warcraft really has is it's got a large budget and a large group of developers, right? So they can
Mhm.
just like easily maintain content every 6 months or so, but I don't know how they can do it in over at Fellowship.
I think, like, I think this game will its player base will overlap significantly with the WoW player base. There's a reason they got a lot of WoW content creators in. I know Meg was playing. I know Yoda played. JB's obviously playing now. Like, I think Jack was playing. Like, there is a clear overlap here because it's just Mythic plus Dungeons. The problem that they've had so far is both of these beta streams or beta events have been right before a major World of Warcraft launch. And if they do this in the future, I don't think their game is going to do well, unfortunately. But if they manage to weave their game in, and when it releases at a time during the dead times of Mythic Plus season, I think their game will pop off. Because I think this game is going to be probably seasonal and a really good downtime for Mythic Plus streamers.
It's kind of interesting. They do a lot of stuff that I think is like super cool. Like they have like weekly leaderboards that you gain cosmetics if you're at the top 5%, 1%, and 0.1% of the weekly leaderboards. Honestly, the gameplay is just like really damn fun. I feel like whenever we started doing higher level adventures and higher level dungeons, just the complexity of the encounters and just like having to actually prog the encounters felt really cool. I thought the combat of this dungeon was like super sick. They also have this matchmaking system, which it is a significantly better matchmaking system to World of Warcraft. Just like straight up, like it's a lot better version of LFG. I think that LFG has its
Hold
problems.
on, before you continue, Tettles, were you for or against solo QM plus? I don't remember. You were against.
I am opposed to solo queue Mythic Plus.
What about this idea?
The way that they have it set up, or you're about to pitch an idea?
Yeah. No. What about this idea that you're talking about right now?
Where they have it basically where you're queuing into dungeons of a specific level. I think it's weird because I think the progression system in this game feels a lot more fluid than Mythic Plus like dungeon progression, if that makes sense. And I think that queuing up for a very specific dungeon on a specific level would feel kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would work for like 10s, for example. I think it would work perfectly for like 10s and weekly keys and whatnot. I don't think it would work if you're trying to use the system in excess of that. Whereas this feels like a system, the way that they've set up these dungeons, this feels like a system that it works well with this. Mythic Plus is just so weird, and WoW is a game that like trying to retrofit solo queue into World of Warcraft, just I don't feel like it works that well, just because of what the nature of the game is. This is a game that's like designed to allow you to play with people in voice and play with your friends in voice and like have these groups if you want. but they're not required. Where World of Warcraft, I don't say requires you to, but it's way more heavily encouraged for you to play with your friends.
I was also against it. Like, I think this game is. I think just the progression system is different. First of all, like if you get to an 11, I mean, I don't know what this looks like. Maybe this might be wrong later on, but you can farm 10s or 9s to gear up to do an 11 easier type thing. So there's like a like I don't know this to be true, but I believe there's infinite gear scaling in this game. Is that right?
I think there's a cap. I don't think it's infinite.
Is there a cap?
I think there is a cap.
That might be wrong then, but that's the first thing. But also, I think this game was built to be like this.
Yeah.
And maybe with these easier dungeons, my opinion might change. And maybe that's also just because I have people to play with. But like I said before, I would be down if Blizzard were to give Mythic solo queue Mythic class solo queue a try, and just see what happens. I don't really think anything would be that bad there.
Yeah, I'd be very, very curious to see how it goes too. Like, I also don't know if it's going to be good or not, but I'd be curious to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that solo queue would be phenomenal if they could do it well in World of Warcraft. That's the big asterisk, right? Is if they can do it well, and like, it's one of those things that I don't think that it would be worth separating your player base either, right? Like, so I think it's something that you'd have to all in on. Where I don't think you can necessarily even have the solo queue and the non-solo queue player base, because I think you just have to have all the people in the exact same game mode, and I think that's the best way of like trying to deal with it. I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like I said initially, right? Retail is like really fun. The problem is you can't play the game.
Yep.
And most players who play this game are pugging, so if there's like some system that allows them to play the game, it would drastically increase fun. So whatever that may be.
I will say there's a lot of baseline quality of life in this game that I think makes solo queue a lot easier. The first is obviously built-in timers. That will be accurate because it's made by the game, so everybody will have accurate timers. But also there's stuff like the interrupt tracker. Just by default, you can press a button and it will show your interrupt cooldown on it will show the interrupt cooldown on like the enemy that, like, you mark an enemy and it will show your interrupt timer on it.
Yeah,
I think
on the nameplate.
Really useful. So that is really awesome as well. So and then the last thing is I think the rotations are just a lot easier. Like, granted, we didn't get every ability when Tells and I were playing, but you look at how many buttons JB has right now, and it's looking like a little less, So I think it'll be a lot like the floor, or rather the ceiling, isn't as high. Therefore, it's not going to be tuned as ridiculously.
I think the hero system.
I don't know. I mean, what I've come to realize over these years is like more buttons doesn't necessarily mean complexity, because you can have a ton of depth and complexity by just having a couple of buttons.
I agree.
League of Legends being like a good example, or like I've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter, and that game's like super simple, but at the same time, it's like there's a ton of depth and a ton of replay value. I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily about the buttons.
I guess.
But yeah, your point still stands.
It's taking one avenue of complexity away, I think is a more fair way to say that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the hero system is cool. I actually really, I don't know what you guys thought about the hero system, but I feel like having heroes that you just like would spawn into the lobby on, as opposed to like having to level these classes, that was something that was so nice to me. Maybe it's because I just like hate leveling, but like you would spawn in on these heroes, and then the process of like playing them is like gearing them.
Yeah, but that's part of a non-MMO experience, right?
Yeah. How are tanks and healers in this game?
Dude, tanking was a lot of fun.
Really?
Like, I actually really enjoyed it. You had a lot you could do. Like, all DPS had like a 20-second cooldown. Tanks had the shortest at like a 12. So that was like you had a lot of control there. Threat wasn't that bad unless Tettles walked his ass into a pack by accident and face pulled something. It was a thing, but like it wasn't that bad. And tanks, the biggest thing for me, tanks did respectable damage.
Hell yeah.
Respectable is an
out-DPSing Tettles
understatement. Yeah, respectable is an understatement to how much damage they were doing.
I mean, like single target, I think the green one is the tank in this circumstance. So obviously, on a single target, I can't imagine, but like AoE damage, I was 1 or 2, I'm pretty sure, on AoE.
What about pull sizes? Do you pull big in this game?
I think you
Or,
could
what about
single or
routing and all
double.
that?
I think you could single or double them. Anything more like when you're someone under geared, you're just gonna die. Tanking was relatively like it wasn't. I think it's what Blizzard is trying to do with tanks. Like Growl had to heal me a little, like or a decent amount, but I also had tools to reduce it. Like the way tanks happened or worked is they have at least the one that I played. There was a bar, and the higher the bar, the less damage you take. I think it's like at the max bar is like 40% damage reduction. So it kind of felt like a blood decay. The healer can see the bar, so the lower that bar goes, the more in trouble you are, and it's your job to keep that bar as high as possible, basically. So, like, it was relatively simple, but there was like some extra buttons to make sure to raise the bar, gain threat, deal damage, and there was a talent system too. So, like, there was enough complexity there that it was like interesting enough for me to keep me engaged.
Oh yeah,
So-
dude,
And-
you brought something up about affixes last week in our group chat. What did you think of? Did you want to pitch that to Dorky? I'm interested in hearing.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the affixes on this key, I think it's like at level +3 or something. Instead of like enemy, sorry, let me start over. Every level you go up, increase the enemy's health and damage by a little. That's normal. But one of the affixes was minus 25% healing instead of increasing damage of the enemies. How do you feel about
okay.
that? If they were to do something like that in WoW.
So one thing I have noticed in this game, from just like glancing at it, I haven't played it yet, is HP bars move significantly slower than World of Warcraft, and that's kind
Definitely.
of what healers have been asking for forever, right? That seems like a good approach.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Healer bars absolutely move slower. Like I was playing like the tank that I was playing, and I was telling Tettles and Growlers, like, I feel like a blood decay. I know when I'm going to die about 5 to 10 seconds in advance because I just run out of stuff. And that's how long it takes for health bars to slow or to go down. Things don't one shot you like the current WoW. It's a slow tick rate. Like you can see that there's like AoE damage on screen right now. It's doing maybe like a 10th of their health bar every tick. It's not much.
It's also not yo-yoing back up.
Exactly. But JB is having to fight for his life here on this hot healer just to like fight against that, and then the damage stops and he's like there's no damage going on right now, and the health bars are just slowly trickling back up. So I think this is what like people want from their healing rather than I got bolted and lost 90% of my HP. Now granted, one of those bolts, if you miss the kick, will deal about 40% HP, but that's still not 90%.
Yeah. So the WoW equivalent would be like after a certain level, you do less damage and less healing, I guess would be the thought process, right?
Well, you doing less damage probably isn't as like a big of a deal, but yeah, like that's such an important part to healing, in my opinion. The times I've enjoyed healing is when it's like a war of attrition. You're trying to not rot out rather than having to karate chop your keyboard and figure out all your healing cooldowns. And you're like, it's almost PvP. It's like pseudo PvP where you trade cooldowns with the boss. Or if a boss does its AoE mechanic, and then you have to press flourish here or whatever. So I definitely like the idea of this for healing.
Funny
And
enough,
probably for tanky too, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, even damage, I'm pretty sure there were just less cooldowns in general, right? Like, you had one defensive, and maybe one offensive on like a minute cooldown or something.
Yeah, it was on a 2-minute CD, and then you had your ult.
And then your ult, but like the ult was good, but also like the 2-minute CD didn't seem that powerful. I feel like cooldowns in general are just less powerful, which is why they can do this, right? Like, if a healer pops a cooldown and it's topping everybody every second, like there's only so much you could do. But when you pop your healer cooldown and it does very little, like a game without cooldowns is definitely Very interesting.
I
don't know.
think,
I don't know if that ever work.
I think that the closer they would like, so if they did this in World of Warcraft, say like +12 the guile, instead of increasing damage and health of the mobs, it decreased your damage and healing done. I don't know if that would necessarily work in WoW, because if it made me feel like I was becoming closer to an amoeba with every single dungeon level I was doing, I would hate it. like the closer to an amoeba I get, the more I would hate the game personally.
Yeah, it can't be for doing damage. It would only have to be for taking damage.
Okay, fair enough.
But I mean, that's also a good point about healing. The whole, I think healers just have too many cooldowns right now. Like, there's too many defensive cooldowns, there's too many group cooldowns, and there's too many healing cooldowns. Healing has always felt the best, in my opinion, when it was just you had your kit, and then you were doing healing with your kit. And I always talk about BFA Resto Druid. BFA Resto Druid was the one time where I actually played a lot of healing. Tuttles, you probably remember this.
Mm-hmm.
It was when Growl quit WoW for the first time for Classic, 2019 Classic, when the original one came out.
I forgot about
This
that.
was season 3. Yeah, this was season 3 of BFA, and he just left our group to dry. So I ended up taking on healing myself. That was when I was in my Dorky Bear Resto Druid arc with Didex tanking. It was a good time.
I think slower healing and less damage and less utility cooldowns is something that pretty much everybody in my circle of friends has been begging for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, the game itself, I think, just to like final thought, it feels a lot closer to Classic than it does retail right now. As in like pace of the game, smaller packs, you're not pulling a bunch of stuff. Like overall, I think the way health bars are moving, things are a lot more methodical. There's still some really interesting bosses. Like there was that one boss where the boss wasn't tanked, and I ran around like rolling a ball over gold piles the entire time. So like cool. things are definitely really interesting. They want to like challenge people in different ways. Yeah, I mean, like I will personally be checking this game out, assuming it doesn't launch right before season 3. Considering their history, I'm expecting this to launch around season 3, and I hope it does it.
Okay, what are these links that you just linked?
Sure. Yeah, so this is my cool thing. So I have been working on some cheat sheets for the raid. Mostly aiming at heroic right now, since that's what the majority of people are going to do. So basically just like a 1-page second monitor style guide, or if you happen to be on the trash before a boss and you have no idea what the boss you're going to is about to do, pull these things up. They have small diagrams to kind of explain really, mechanics. And some of the bosses will have an appendix page where it will show you like a pattern or something because it's deemed important. So goes through like when to lust, whether you should be AoE or single target, any pre-fight assignments that you need, and just a general idea of what the boss fight does. So feel free to check those out. Those will be on Wowhead very shortly.
Did these do well last patch?
Yes, they did very well. People really like them.
It's good.
Yeah, it's like we said, this is rating nowadays, so make sure you guys come prepared.
Make sure you have your 1-page 600-word document for your side monitor.
Make sure you check out the Draddle's documentaries and all that.
Dude, the documentary shout out is crazy because that's just like the truth. I can't believe that there was a 1.5-hour Ansarek video.
I was thinking what would happen if Toldagor was to be released in a Mythic Plus season. We would get that video again.
1 hour and 6 minutes. Combined with the 20-minute comprehensive guide for Heroic. Congratulations.
What about you, Dorky? Anything you want to talk about or discuss?
There are probably some hot topics that we can leave for a different time.
Okay. So where is he going with this?
Dude, I was thinking we should do like a collab episode where we just talk about all the hot topics, like Titan Forging and AP. What else is there?
Solo queue.
Add-ons and weak auras, solo queue. Yeah. We just like battle it out.
That's a dude.
Corruption. I mean, is corruption a that hot of a topic? Maybe it is a hot
It
topic.
was at the time because of its acquisition. Oh, Shards Domination. Got it.
Okay, I mean, that one is not even hot. That one's just pure
That's
dog
cold.
shit.
That's ice cold. Yeah. Dude, our comment sections already get on all of our asses enough. That would be a crazy episode.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much, Dorky, for joining. Where can people
All right.
find you?
I don't know. I don't even stream nowadays, honestly.
Are you doing
But,
are you doing routes this season?
No, not really. I haven't really done routes. Well, I mean, I sort of do them. Like, whenever I'm doing routes, it's mostly just like, all right, like here's what you should know about these dungeons, and I'm just like putting notes on like what are the dangerous pulls and all that. Because like, there really isn't a whole lot of routing nowadays.
Yeah.
Definitely a huge part of M+ that I miss.
All right. If there's one thing that you could give advice to in the upcoming Mythic Plus season to people, what would it be? A difficult
Good luck.
boss, difficult pack, routing, anything like that.
Honestly, I'm not even sure because like these dungeons have changed so much. In fact, like I'm actually doing some runs where there's so many. They've been changing these dungeons like crazy. Like I played a bunch last week, and then this week I haven't really played much, and it's so different.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, have you guys noticed some of these changes? Just like the most random stuff, like last boss of Motherload, instead of the homing missiles only going in range players, which that's how it behaved for all of BFA and for most of the PTR cycle. Now it can go on anyone.
I did not know that, actually.
They keep adding mobs
Yeah.
in Floodgate in the worst possible spots.
Oh, really?
Oh, did they add more?
They wanted you to stop pulling trash into the first boss, and so they put 2 shreddinators at these choke points that people were running to get to the first boss, and so now you have to like go in a different direction.
That's really funny, actually. Is Bubble still a menace?
That guy sucks. Yeah.
Gives like no count too.
I think that there's gonna be a pretty big tuning pass for that dungeon in Priory. Kind of my expectation.
But I hope so. Yeah, like I've been optimistic about this season, but I am also very worried.
Fair enough. All right.
That's it for us this week with episode 31 of The Bench. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much,
See you
Dorky.
guys.